welcome to Real Talk, episode 79. I'm Todd, this is AJ, and we're back.
Yo, how y'all doing?
Hey, I think they're doing pretty good. I'm going to answer for them.
That's really a new thing.
I like it. Hey, let them know in the comments below. How you doing?
Hey.
If you're new to Real Talk, you're in for a treat today, because we've decided to go down a rabbit hole that, I don't know, we've wrestled with. And by wrestled with, we thought about for 5 to 10 minutes whether to do it. But we did seek counsel from other elders and leaders of our church to see if we should do this. So, Real Talk typically is an opportunity to talk about life, God, the Bible, and hear two hooligans, guys that love Jesus that, certainly don't have it all together.
That's the truth.
But are talking about life, God, the Bible, and everything in between. And up above, you'll see a link, www.theremnant.life/real-talk. That's REAL-talk, in case for the podcast, folks.
Boom.
And that link is open all the time. 24/7, 365, completely anonymous, and you can ask questions or give topics, and it gets dropped in below. We've gotten some really good topics recently.
Oh, yeah.
Which we've been asking for. If people didn't want to just do questions, we love the questions. It's been great questions. Keep them coming. But topics as well. For instance, someone said, hey, can we have more of a light-hearted Real Talk podcast in which you guys discuss some of your strange behaviors or things we've eaten, or that would fill many episodes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because we are weird people.
Oh, beyond weird, probably.
But today is not that day, AJ.
Nope.
Today is a day in which we're going to discuss a simple question. Ready?
Yep.
Are we a cult? Question mark. And we'll talk about that. We want to talk about the idea of a cult. We want to talk about how serious it is to call any church, not us, but that common theme, right? It seems to be when people don't like a church, they use the word cult. The danger in that is that I think it minimizes, we'll get to that in a second, what a cult really is, because a true cult is actually very dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
So to call a church that because it has, I don't know, whether you don't like them or whatever, we'll get into that. So, again, if you're tuning in to episode 79 via one of our numerous podcast formats, which is really any, just type in Real Talk Web Series, or this video, we're going to tackle the question of, AJ, are we a cult?
I don't know.
So, before we do that, we'll take a second, catch you guys up on just our life.
Yeah.
Like we like to do that briefly. So, how you been, man? How's your week going?
To keep it brief, life, I don't know, man. Every day is just a choice. I always go back to that, and I guess for me lately, I can feel myself. I feel like I've been closer to God lately, which is good. Like, I've been reading a lot more.
Like you felt closer?
Yes. Yeah. And I've been praying more. I've been talking to Him a lot more. But faith without action is dead. And so,
yeah,
it's been nice. And, I think, obviously, I'm always my own harshest critic of life in anything I do. So I think, I can often feel like I am not a real Christian so often because, I feel like I don't do things, like I feel like I don't do what I should do, or, I feel like I just suck. So, and I know that it's funny because a lot of the time we're on this show, right, we talk about, like, hey, like, what are you supposed to do when you're not feeling well, about life, you read and you pray and you do all these things, right, and which is good, that's good, and that's what I've been doing, and I feel better, but I think when it comes to action, like, I guess I'm often questioning, like, where my heart is, right, because I would rather, and I don't know if this is right, so you'd have to, I don't know, but I feel like I would rather have a heart towards the disciplines, right? Like praying, being in the Word, than empty actions that my heart actually really isn't even in.
Yeah, sounds.
And it's meaningless, really, because I'm just doing it as an act and not actually doing it for God.
Well, don't you think when you're doing the disciplines that is action?
Yeah, I guess it is. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times with that, it's just, is there fruit in your life? And part of that is certainly the biblical definition, right? Peace, love, joy, all those things. But also, like, does your faith show itself in action? So the fact that you're reading and praying and doing the things God says shows that your faith is living, right? Now I get what you mean. I think I know what you mean is like other things.
Yes.
And I do think there's, we've talked about like being on mission, for instance, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's cool that you're asking those questions, but I mean, give yourself a little bit of leeway in the sense of your faith is showing itself in action. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, man. It's so, I guess I get caught up in the idea of what I want. I guess I don't want to feel like I'm sad all the time because I'm like, my life's just one big sacrifice. You know, like,
Sure.
it's good to be sacrificial. Like, that's what we're called to do. Die to self every day. You know, pick up your cross and die to yourself. And so I think it's beautiful, but I think there's a weight that comes with that. But I think within that weight, if you, and I guess this is what I'm battling with, is if you let that weight just crush you, like you let that weight, like, not.
The weight of dying to self, kind of.
Exactly. If you don't let that become like joyous in any sort of way, then it's probably gonna feel dead. And I guess that's what I mean by your heart, because I feel like if you can't see the beauty in that, your heart isn't in it, and then
it doesn't really matter.
It makes you feel like, why am I even doing this? So, I guess for me,
is this the music thing again?
No. Actually, this is really funny. So it's funny you brought that up. With music, I've actually found myself just listening to the Bible instead.
That's what I do, man. I listen to podcasts a lot.
I just go on the Bible app and just hit play. And I just listen to the Bible while I'm driving. So
have you noticed a difference in anything?
Oh yeah, and
like in your
even
mindset, or
definitely, like it's definitely helped a lot. It's funny because like even I don't know why, but for some reason, and this is probably I need to think about this, but for some reason, like I've tried going on like today's like worship like playlist, and like I'm just like skip.
Why?
I don't know.
You got, but you like worship when you're there.
Yes, and that's what I was about to mention. When I'm like here on Sundays and like we're in there like doing our thing, like I cry.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, this is beautiful. But I'm just like in my car listening, I'm like, this doesn't stand.
I made my own worship list of songs that really speak, like help me to worship better.
Yeah.
So maybe try that, man. Instead of even just the generic ones, like just start. When I first started, I think I had like 4. You know, and now I've got 60 or 80. You know, or whatever. Actually, I don't think I have that many, but.
That's a good idea because, like, I love music, but for some reason, like, when I'm, like, just, like, going through... You know, go ahead.
No, it's just, you're just such a rebel, man, in this one area. Like, you have your taste, and you just do not accept anything more.
Which is so weird, though, because it's so, like, I have a variety of what I like. Like, genre-wise, I do.
Because it all seems pretty depressing.
I like the metal. I like the rock music. I like the hip hop.
I like the hippity hop.
I like the hip hop.
Yeah.
You know, and I can dive into like R&B. Like I like that kind of stuff. Like it's
R&B.
I like that variety of stuff, but for some reason, like I guess I don't know, man. That's just a weird. You're right. It's a weird part of me that I, for some reason, struggle with. And so, and I guess we all have those parts of us. And I guess for me, it's I'm realizing more and more how much like it is rebellious because of like it's supposed to music.
Well, just rebellious in the sense that like you have felt it yourself. Like I don't want to do this, and you're like I'm fighting myself on it. You know, it's like it's not rebellious in the sense that I care, anyone else cares. But
it's so funny.
Because I think I've told you this, when it comes to music and stuff like that, man, like I think it's a matter of conscience and what we feel convicted about or led to change if we have to, because I do think that can be different, right? But clearly you have felt convicted, and you for some reason check out last week's episode and you hear this guy argue with himself. A week before.
It was funny because they're coming out with that new Batman movie, and
what? It's just awesome when you like something. It comes up all the time because I heard you 2 days ago. Hey man, watch that new Batman trailer. I was like, oh, the Robert Pattinson one, is he good at Batman? Oh man, he's real good at Batman. Then they reference it again.
Well, I watched the trailer again yesterday.
Okay.
And so I realized, I was like, wait a second. And they used a Nirvana song.
Sure.
And they used, what's it called? I can't think of what it's called, but it's got that cool, like real, like, dark sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, oh man, this really fits, like,
cool.
the idea of Bruce Wayne. And, like I said, like, that's a different kind of Batman they're going for. And, like, that song really, like, made the vibe of that whole trailer really awesome.
Yeah.
And so I was like, huh. And I found myself, like, listening to it. I was like, huh. And I was like, gosh dang, I can't do this.
Dude, even the fact that you watched the trailer again shows that, like, when you find music or something you like, you just watch it over and over. Like,
I
I
do.
like this trailer. I'm just gonna watch the same trailer 12
Yeah.
times. No, it's not bad. It's just it's hilarious.
And like I don't know, it just matched it so well. But I was also like, so it made me just want to listen to the song, and I was like, I can't. So yeah, I did.
Why do you like to be sad? I just don't understand it.
I don't know. I don't know, man. It's so weird. I think
Yeah,
I think for
it
me,
is.
I think
Because I'm the complete opposite, so everyone knows. You
Yeah.
know this. If I hear something that sounds sad, I'm like,
Yeah.
I gotta change it immediately.
I
I'm
think-
very susceptible to music.
I think I'm an empath,
Sad, you know.
and when I hear someone's raw emotions, I respect it, and like it makes me feel like, man, like I feel for
You
them,
just feel something.
and I can like I can relate, I
Gotcha.
guess, and so, and this is where it gets weird, and like I said, I think this is kind of like a deeper part that goes into it. But like when I listen to like you hear like the worship music and hear all that, it's a good message. But it can, I can see your face. I'm not saying it's bad. That's not what I'm saying in the slightest. It brings hope. I 100% believe that. But I guess for me, and I guess that's the rebellious part of me that hasn't died yet, is like, I'm like, it's just like, yes, there's hope in it, but there's no, well, I shouldn't say that. I was about to say there's no raw emotion in it. That's not true at all.
See, that's what I'm saying. Your definition of raw emotion is only negative emotion. Have you not noticed that? Raw emotion to you is only like depression and sadness. So this
Yeah.
leads me to the next question. So
Yeah.
even if that's true, why do you think you felt convicted about it? If you're like it's just raw emotion. So like why have you felt convicted about it?
Because
Or like you should change it?
Because I know that if I let myself sit in that, like, then it makes me feel like there's no hope in the world.
Okay, yes. Why do you want to live in that? That's so irrational.
It's weird, man. I feel like there's this weird part of me that thinks, and I don't, like I said, I don't think this is right. I'm not saying that this is good. When people, those people who write those songs, right? Like, do they go through hard times? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do they ever write about that stuff? I don't know, because
Who are you talking about? The worship people?
Yes.
Listen, worship music is to do what? Bring glory to God. You're praising God.
yeah,
And, if you think about it, about to get deep, not shaming music, but sometimes those songs you're talking about are really glorifying the self because it's all about what I feel.
that's really good.
Versus, like, again, clearly everyone knows we're not talking about whether or not music is bad.
Right.
We're really talking about, like, whatever. And I just think it's interesting. Like, this thing with you and music, you know this, since we've known each other,
Yeah.
has been such an interesting thing. Because I joke about it, but I
Yeah.
try to understand the mindset because we're pretty similar in a lot of ways, but that is an area we are so different. Because
Yeah.
I actually agree with you in the sense of like you can feel the emotion.
Oh, yeah.
And I also agree with you that I'm a bit of an empath too that can feel it, but I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Like, where you're like, if I stay in it too long, it makes me feel like there's no hope. I'm like, yeah, that's why I don't want to do it. And you're like, I just want to sit in that, man, and really just let that wash over me.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, but like I guess there is what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
I'm intrigued by it.
What you should be intrigued. Yeah, I should be, I guess. That makes sense, man.
Yeah,
I get
I'm
it.
intrigued by the idea of how that comes about, like how that you can feel that. It's people talking about their raw, like what they went through in life and how it makes them feel, and so for me, I'm like, man, I get that because I've been there. It's like a bittersweet symphony. Shout out
Nice.
to Serve.
Nice.
They make no money from that song. But yeah, it's just I guess there's a bittersweetness to it that's hard to explain because it brings you back to those moments and you can feel them and you can see them and you remember the good, but then also you remember that it's not a part of you anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's the best place to go, like land on it. It's a bittersweet when you're listening and it reminds you of those times.
That makes sense, I
Yes.
guess. Anyway, fascinating. You and your music ways, fascinating to me. But cool.
Yes. Anyways.
No, man, that was good.
How's your week been?
Okay, so just random updates, some things that I've been doing. So last week, I've had terrible stomach issues. So I've been told I have IBS by doctors. People that go to the doctor, I'm like, I have. What is IBS? Essentially, your stomach is like overly sensitive in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I won't go too much into it. So he shows itself in different ways. A lot of times for me, it's like cramping and bloating and just pain, right?
Yep.
Like you've been around for a lot of these attacks. Well, I finally kind of put together. Last week was pretty terrible. I think I mentioned that on Real Talk Live. Like, man, I just had a rough week.
You're right.
A lot of different stuff, personal stuff, and just relational issues in general with different people. It's just a challenging week. And I'm the type of guy that I don't necessarily, my mind doesn't feel stressed. You know this, like I just push through. But you've also learned, and I will let everyone else know, that my body, on the other hand, says, nah, we still feel it. So it's this weird thing where, like, by the end of the week, I'm like going through this 3 or 4 day period. I call them attacks, right? This IBS attack that was just so miserable. You know that. I'm throwing up. I don't feel good sometimes. Like, I'm just in pain, whatever.
I feel bad for you.
Yeah, you've been around, so that's why I reverence it. You know it comes. It's terrible when it's there. It's not me, like, being a wimp. It's legit. But then someone was like, I don't remember, it was like, hey, man, well, didn't you say you had a rough week? And all of a sudden clicked. It's like, dang, dude, that's true. Like, I wasn't feeling stressed, but even though my mind seemed fine, my body was like, whatever. So with that, I decided to make more of a conscious effort to reduce my stress. How did I do that? I tried to sleep. As you know, everyone is, if you're a long-term Real Talk listener, watcher, Todd does not sleep. I do not sleep well. That's not an exaggeration. I struggle with it. And people don't know is like, I want to sleep. I just don't sleep well. So anyway, I slept better than typical this weekend. I made an effort. Again, compared to normal healthy people, not great. But to me, I did. Drank a ton of water, just kind of getting back in a positive. Cut down on my caffeine significantly, as you know, because I sucked down the energy drinks until... So like the last couple of days, I've had like a half or one the whole day, which is a big deal to me. Because I don't drink any coffee or anything either, so that's it. So, what do I say? I've noticed some differences. One, I seem to be in a better mood. And I don't know if that is because, I don't know why. Perhaps a mixture of sleep combined with not trying to compensate for the lack of sleep with an abundance of caffeine, which really only... So I'm very thankful for that. All that to say, it's been cool. We'll see what happens. My stomach, thankfully, has gotten a little better too. Of course, I say that, it kind of hurts right now, but whatever. But I'm like really thankful for that. I'm trying to think. As far as God, so anyway, that's kind of where I'm at, and why today I'm a little. I just noticed why you were even talking. For the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of like mopey even on Real Talk, and I think today's probably the closest to being who I really am, my personality-wise, than I have been in a while. Yeah, man, I think with God, I'm just constantly fascinated with how everything about Him and what He does in us is so contrary to the way we interact with each other as humans so many times. So even the call to love, I give 100 examples. When He says, for instance, you say love your brother, well, everyone loves his brother. I'm paraphrasing. I tell you to love your enemies. That's so big, right? Like I'm telling you, and even you saying die to self. I've had this thought lately that I think a lot of times we get into a depression when we think about dying to self because we view it as like He wants us to kill every desire we have, and that's not true. He wants us to kill every desire we have that's contrary to Him. That doesn't mean kill who we are. It means die to self, self being that part of us that rebels against God. That's not something to be depressed about, but I think we can because it kind of goes back to the heart. Like I might be giving something up, but I'm hating doing it. And that's missing the point of what He's saying, because what He has for us is better than what we have for ourselves.
Dude, that's so good. Children.
Yeah. So it's funny that you brought that up because I've been pondering that myself the last few weeks. Of like sometimes I think I get, I even say it to people and they take it as, because when I say it, man, it's about dying to self. I actually am viewing it as like this freedom, because only in dying to that false self am I really free. It's kind of like the Matrix, man. I got to give up this false sense of life to have real life. And that's worth it. And I think sometimes we don't view it that way because we get caught up in our own desires and the things we want. And, I will talk to people, and so many times the root of their frustration and their families or in church or relationships boils down to the fact that deep, deep down, they don't want to give up what they want to do what's right. And right being what God tells us to do. And the truth is, and then the coolest moments are the moments when maybe I'm talking to someone, counseling someone, and then they come back and they did it, and they see this incredible fruit that comes of it. And it's like, why? And then they get that moment, I'm sure you and I have had it, where you're like, dang it, why don't I do that all the time?
Oh, absolutely. Every single time. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I fight this?
So, kind of with you in that, and it was neat to hear you say that, and I guess I wanted to encourage you that, remember, God doesn't want to kill who you are. He wants to kill the fake you so that you can be all the good things and unique things that he made you are the way they're supposed to be, right? Which is like, if you think about it, this gets deep. That's the real you. The you without all of the mud and the junk around it. The real you. It's pretty cool. And in that is freedom, right? Because truthfully, a lot of the things we run to for life or for ourselves are empty, and we end up feeling sad anyway.
You're right.
So even I think it's kind of cool, man, the microcosm of you and music. Like in the short run, it's bothered you. But in the long run, you're sitting here saying, like, I didn't even think of this till just now. You've been listening. You've been essentially reading the Bible more because you cut that music out.
Yep.
And he's up there going, I knew you wouldn't like that other music, so I knew you'd come to me and my word. And it's like, that's pretty cool, right?
That's wild.
And then you even just said, oh, I've noticed a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely.
All coming from this conviction that you felt to give up music that at the time just felt like, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do it? Which in turn leads here. It's pretty cool. And that is my week.
Nice. Heck yeah.
So, this takes us to, you know what? The question of the day, AJ.
Question of the day.
Are we a cult?
No.
Are we? Spoiler, no. So let me give you guys, like, here's why we wrestled with discussing this. We thought about the fact that if we discuss this, are we giving credence? I mean, good word, look that up. Are we fanning the fire of those who make this claim? Okay. So, Todd, what do you mean? People have called you a cult? Yes, and it typically is like 3 people. Literally, it comes back to one family, and disgruntled people. And like I can go into it. I know that a relative of a member here who is not a believer is actually into witchcraft. This is the irony. Into witchcraft, legitimate witchcraft, is practicing an alternative lifestyle, let's just call it that, but has the audacity to tell a friend of ours who goes to our church that they're a cult. Like, isn't that ironic?
That's very ironic.
So, we've been said that. So, honestly, the reason we wanted to discuss it isn't so much our church in the defense. I think it's intriguing because what I've noticed since I became a Christian, I think you have too, and you can speak into this even, is that that's like the go-to insult to churches and pastors. Yeah. They're a cult, right? So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of some people that have been called a cult. Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church. They've been called a cult.
Okay.
Everyone's like, oh, you ready for this? This is a big one. We certainly know there are other ones who are called. Joel Osteen has been called a cult.
Okay.
All right. Now, I just want to give you a bunch of names, and I'm not going to tell you whether I think they are or aren't, but I want you to see the wide variety of people. You ready for this one? John MacArthur. If you know who John MacArthur is, he's a 79 to 80-some-year-old pastor who is considered incredibly theologically conservative, has started a very well-respected in theological circles, okay? His own, I just read one today, where they're like, it's cultish. And so, Mark Driscoll, a guy that I look up to, his church was called cultish at one point. It seems that there's no set definition of that. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be kind of like, if I want to hurt someone, if I want to hurt a Christian or a church, I'm going to throw that word out and just hope it sticks. Mm. And the irony of it is that if they don't say anything, which a lot of the big churches don't, right? Like Elevation Church is not responding to people calling them, because you could type that in there, and then it's going to come up with a bunch of things why they're a cult. They don't respond to it because whatever. You know, why? Why would you do that? So then, you ready for some other cult leaders? What's his name? What's the Jones, the famous Jones? That Jim Jones?
Yeah.
Jim Jones, right? I know. We'll talk about that. So Jim Jones, who did the church, I think it was like the People's Church, started in Indiana, weirdly enough. Got a bunch of people. Yeah, did you know that? Down south. Anyway, he's the guy who ended up killing all of his followers, drank poison Kool-Aid, and died.
He took them to like a whole other country.
Yeah, to South America. So here's the thing. So you're sitting there, and I've put up like 5 to 8 names or whatever. I don't know how many we put up. And from a wide variety, and you're calling all of them a cult. You can add us to the list, random people. So I think it's important for us to bring up the discussion of, one, what is a cult? What is a cult in Christian, even in general? What is a cult? Let's define it.
Right.
Okay. Once we define it, let's talk about some of the weird things we've heard about why we're a cult, and then why maybe some of the bigger ones have been called that as well, Elevation Church. Because I can tell you right now, a couple of the reasons they've been called that. I've read it. You had a fly on me. You just distracted me. And then we'll kind of piece it together, and then we'd love to get your guys' comments as well. And we'll kind of give our thoughts on why we think the real motivation of it is a lot of times. Because, spoiler alert, most of the time, it's fleshly, meaning sinful and personal. It's just people get hurt and upset, and they want to call names. It's like when you're a kid, you're going to call someone fat to hurt their feelings.
Right.
It's the Christian church label of that. So, AJ, I see that you actually had what is it? The definition.
Yeah.
What is it called? What is it called? Dictionary definition. That's it. The dictionary definition of cult. And then we have looked up numerous lists. You and I were talking about it. We'll share those with you of kind of the signs of a cult. There are essentially, from all the resources we found, there are 5 to 8 that are all in common. Everybody agrees on. So we'll read those. Okay. We'll discuss them. And then we'll talk about, this might be a long episode, we'll see. We'll kind of talk about why, what fits? And then the dangers of doing that and how that can actually help real cults. Because honestly, when you call churches cults, when you throw that out there, you're actually helping real cults. Yeah. Because they can go, everybody gets called this.
Yep.
You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So we've got to, as Christians particularly, non-Christians, we can't really control if they call us cults because they don't get it, and I don't really care. I get concerned when self-professing Christians run around calling anybody they disagree with theologically or anything cults. I think it's dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Definitely dangerous.
So,
all right.
Are we a cult? What's the definition, AJ?
So the definition of cult, it says, noun.
Thank you.
A system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. Example sentence, the cult of St. Olaf.
Nice example. I like it.
Let's see here. Here's another one, just a quick little side one here. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. That is another one they have in here.
Sinister, oof.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Pretty scary.
Pretty scary.
All right, so that's the definition. I want to read that again. So a system of veneration directed toward a particular figure. So by the way, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. If you do that, if you use that definition, every Christian church is a cult. Because we're a system of religious veneration, devotion directed toward a particular figure. His name is Jesus. Mm-hmm. So clearly we don't mean that. We can't mean that when we're calling churches cults, right? Because that'd be everyone. A relatively small group of people have religious beliefs practiced regarded by others as strange as sinister. Mm-hmm. Again, the example here is a network of Satan-worshipping cults. A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person. A cult of personality surrounding the leaders, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at as far as just definition. Now I want to talk about, I thought we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
So even the word itself is so broad.
Yeah, it really is.
That any Christian could be, really, honestly, couldn't any religion be considered a cult if you go that way? Buddhists are venerating Buddha?
Yes.
If you go by that first definition.
Yes, if you go by the first definition, really, absolutely.
Now, as we're going to kind of dive in, and I'm going to talk a little more at the beginning because we just have to as we read through this, and then we'll share. I just want people to know. We have a lot of information to get out to you guys, so it's going to be a little different. So before we begin, when the Bible doesn't talk about cult, but the Bible does talk about the danger of false teachers. Yeah. So, for instance, in Acts 20, 29, and 30, it says, I believe this is Paul says, I know that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock, and from among your own selves, men will arise speaking perverse things to draw away the disciples after them. That's Paul speaking to the early church. That's the idea of where cults come from. So it's the idea of false teachers that come in to our system in the church. This is what I think Christian churches should be on guard against. And they are speaking things contrary to the Bible, right? In opposition to the gospel, twisting it to draw people to follow them versus Jesus.
Okay.
So I'm looking at Crosswalk, which is it's a faith-based website that gives a lot of different articles. So do I agree with everything Crosswalk says? But I think for the most part, they're pretty trustworthy as far as general thoughts on things.
Gotcha.
I've also looked at numerous others, so we'll kind of look through here.
Sure.
So first it says the most dastardly, insidious mark of a cult is that it ignores or distorts the gospel of Jesus Christ. To one degree or another, all cults deny the deity of Jesus Christ. And why is that dangerous? Because their teachings and principles will eventually leave a person unsaved without a relationship with Jesus Christ and spending eternity in hell. The Bible teaches that faith in Christ plus nothing else equals salvation. We say that all the time.
Yep.
If someone ever teaches something that it's faith plus something equals, all right, it's not. It's Jesus, faith in Jesus equals salvation. Adding to it is wrong.
That's right.
And that goes back to, so it talks about, in bold, they have here, faith plus anything else is heresy. So if there is an organization teaching that to be saved, yeah, Jesus, they might even mention Jesus, he's here, but you have to do X, Y, Z, that's cultish, right? Does that make sense?
100%.
So
I'm with you.
sometimes that can even be taking certain things. And I'm not, be careful, guys, like, this is who we are. Like, I know that this can be twisted what we say, but do I think that, there could even be slow down, Todd. There can be a focus on even certain spiritual gifts or certain things that get added to it. So yeah, Jesus saves you, but if you don't do this, you're not really saved. That's more dangerous, right? Because it's teaching something against, contrary to the gospel.
Would you consider that same concept, but say they replaced salvation with
Holiness or something?
Sure. Or what if they made it into different levels?
That's
I am, because you can't do this, you may still be saved, you might still be saved, but you're in this corner. We put you
You're
in this
not
corner,
special.
and you're not up here.
Yes, I think that can be. But what happens is eventually even that's distorting it, right? Because you're naming,
would you still consider that cultish?
This is where it gets a great line. I would have to know the presentation of the gospel as a whole, right? So if I say, for instance, I think if a leader is to say, yes, you are saved by Jesus, but you're not loved by him, right? That's still changing the gospel,
right?
Or he loves these people more. You're you know what I mean? We can create all kinds of weird stuff. Essentially, guys, listen, if it goes against the Bible, not things that secondary issues, things that we might have disagreements on as far as, can you drink alcohol? Should you drink alcohol? Should you, how many times do you get dunked to be baptized? Things that don't change the gospel. But if there's things that change the gospel, that's a problem. That's cult talk, right?
Right.
And it talks about Galatians 1, 6, and 9 here. I'm amazed that you are so quickly deserting him, Jesus, who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel. Who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel, which is really not another. But even though we, or an angel from heaven, should preach to you a gospel contrary to that which we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so I say again, if any man is preaching to you a gospel contrary to that which you have received, let him be accursed or cursed. Paul's taking that seriously, right? Anyway, so number one issue with a cult is it teaching something contrary, opposing to the gospel.
Right.
Jesus plus, Jesus or, those kinds of things. Secondly, most cults are led by a dynamic, charismatic leader who eventually controls and manipulates his followers. Now, here's where we have a problem. Let's take Stephen Furtick.
Okay.
Stephen Furtick's a charismatic guy.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he's a cult leader.
No.
In fact, John MacArthur's a charismatic guy. So just because Stephen Furtick is charismatic, and Jim Jones clearly was charismatic, he could get people to follow him. Someone being charismatic, in the sense of having a personality that draws people, does not mean they're a cult leader.
Charisma is not a sin.
Thank you. That's a simple way. Charisma is not a sin.
Yeah.
It's no different. And I think sometimes, if someone's charismatic and you're not a part of that church, you want to accuse them of that because people are getting drawn to him. Now, do I think there are charismatic church leaders who do make it about them? Sure. Again, we're talking charismatic as in personality, look, all those things. Just because a guy's handsome, dresses well, whatever, doesn't mean he's a cult leader. You might want to say, oh, he's bordering on making it about himself, or maybe he's vain, but that's still not being a cult leader.
No.
And it's dangerous to say that.
Yes,
So even this term, they use Jim Jones as the example.
Yeah.
We're talking about a guy, okay, so who, he would go to city. When people went to investigate, they, there's a congressman killed.
Yep.
All these other things, man.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
a brash, Jones was a brash overlord who enslaved his followers. Like, they, and the other example we've seen in other sources is a charismatic leader a true cult leader will try to control every aspect of your life. So he's in there saying, this is how you spend your money, this is how you dress, this is, we make the joke around here, we're not cult leaders because we're not rich enough and we don't have 10 wives, right? They're the types that come in and go, your wives are mine, you do what we say. If you don't do this, God doesn't love you. But again, if you really think about it, that boils back to Jesus plus. I speak for God. They typically also think they're the only ones who can hear or speak from God. They don't put the emphasis on the Bible. Yeah. They say, I am the interpreter of God's truth. Me alone.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. So again, it's almost like because Christians started using that term so, I'm going to be honest, this is a terrible use of the word, stupidly, like you're being ignorant to use it. You are literally helping true dangerous leaders. Because I'm sitting here thinking a real cult leader can go, well, look, they call all of these established churches cults. Of course they're saying that about us because we are speaking truth.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
You're just kind of blending us all in a melting pot, and no one can really tell what is what.
Now it's hard to see who the wolves really are because you're calling sheep wolves. Yep. You're calling a handsome sheep who dresses nice. Well, he's a wolf. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I don't like, I'm trying to, okay. Fourth, cult leaders tend to ignore, confuse, add to, or demean the Bible's teachings. So it's easy to trap, this article says it's easy to trap Christians when cultists speak Christian language. This is why churches need to teach the Bible early and definitely. Yeah, again, goes back to the Bible is the authority. Yep. So we've even said here at the church, listen, if we ever say, don't take our word for it, take the messages we give, both in Real Talk and our sermons, and go compare it to the Bible. Right? If the Bible says differently, the Bible, not what even your interpretation of the truth, but like what it says, yeah, man, certainly we would want to know that. Any church leader.
Definitely.
Trying to see what else it's saying here. They essentially demean the truth of the scriptures. This can also be when you hear church leaders saying, I definitely know when the end of the world's coming. It's this time because God has revealed it to me, even though Jesus said no one will know the time or date.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're setting yourself above Jesus.
Yeah, 100%.
This one says, cults also use devious methods to trap, deceive, and control. So in an article titled Power Abusers, Ronald Enroth demonstrates some of the tools used by cults to control their behavior control. An individual's associations, his living arrangements, food, clothing, sleeping habits, finances are strictly controlled.
That's insane.
Information control. Cult leaders deliberately withhold or distort information, lie, propagandize, and limit access to the source of information. Thought control. Cult leaders use loaded words and language, discourage critical thinking, bar any speech critical of cult leaders, and teach a us versus everyone else doctrine. Emotional control. Leaders manipulate their followers via fear, including the fear of losing salvation, fear of being shunned, etc. So, there you go. Okay. And I like this article because it gives how to avoid being seduced by cult leaders. Study scripture to know truth. Listen, guys, you got to know the Bible. If you don't know the Bible, then anyone that says something confidently can make you believe it.
100%.
Yeah. Don't forget or ignore what you've already learned. Essentially, again, it goes back to knowing. Consciously pray and practice. That's consciously pray. Ask God to help you. Develop a consistent, committed walk with Christ. I like this one. Grow up. Before leaving the house in the morning, put on the spiritual armor of God. That kind of stuff. I think if we're given a good overview, I'm trying to think of the other article I had looked at earlier. I'll try to find it real quick.
Yeah. I think that...
yeah, you can give thoughts while I'm looking this up. I just want to sort of define it before we talk.
Yeah, man. I like that they brought up in that list, the idea of the thought, the manipulation, and the control of every aspect of your life. Like that's so big.
The reason they define it that way is it's hard for us. It's probably hard for people to believe that actually happens. So then they start just calling anyone a church, a cult, right? Like, instead of understanding that real cults are doing these ridiculous things, like these dangerous, ridiculous things. Biggest, first and foremost, being they are changing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they're changing the Bible. And just because you don't like someone, listen, there's pastors I don't like personally. But you know this. There are pastors I don't like personally that I still don't ever accuse of preaching a false gospel.
Right.
I may not like their personality, but, I may not like the messenger, but they're preaching the real message.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes we don't like someone and we start calling them stuff. Like this one gives an example of a cult. It's hard to believe, but there are reports from some churches that staff must rise when the pastor enters the room. They aren't allowed to look him in the eye. They can never talk to him, engage him unless he takes initiative. And they must refer to him by title and never simply by his first name, all because he deserves that honor. Right. First of all, no one calls me pastor, so I don't, or you. But it's just a thought. So, the signs of a cult church: demand for special treatment, honor, recognition. It's focused on an individual. To the exclusion of Jesus, right? No one is allowed to question the leader without retribution. I'm trying to find ones that we haven't shared because this is a different article. The line between what God is doing and what our leader is doing is almost non-existent. Again, we can't. I don't know anyone personally that does that, but it happens, right? The leader is handled as a carefully handled celebrity. This one's clearly talking about some of the big name people.
Oh, yeah.
There's no sense of team leadership, team teaching, or team mentality. Person travels in an entourage. Teaching revolves around themselves. Again, it's all the same thing. Where it's more about the person or to the exclusion of the gospel. Because here's the thing, man. We're all humans, and sometimes we could all have moments of pride.
Oh, sure.
So if you listen to let's say we listen to a pastor's sermon, and he has one moment that comes off as prideful, that doesn't mean that he is a prideful person.
Right.
Like, we've got to stop. We've got to stop. And I think part of the way to do that is like, okay, we just shared a picture that's pretty clear and pretty crazy sounding, right? Should we be putting Stephen Furtick, for instance, John MacArthur, Mark Driscoll in the same category that we're putting Jim Jones in?
Absolutely not.
Like, that's so scary to me,
that
dude.
Is ludicrous.
Thank you. But we're doing that, right? We as Christians, we do that.
Right.
So, guys, quit saying that. Quit it. Now, I will give you, now we're going to talk, and I don't have a list of this, so maybe you'll remember too. I want to give you a couple of examples of things we've been called a cult for. And some of them are hilarious because one was a meeting with a guy. So we have been called a cult because, I'm going to try to make the quote up. Well, why do you guys spend so much time together? Because they're friends. So if I were to tell you...
Because we like each other.
We can have friends, man.
Yes.
So it's like, to me, I always thought that's crazy.
Newsflash, you can have friends in your church.
He's right. So it's like, I think it's weird that if people go out with their work friends 3 times a week, which I used to work in a bank and people did, no one said, why do you spend so much time with your bank friends? Like, these are friends. Like, our church has it doesn't mean at the exclusion of other people. In fact, we want to multiply, meaning we want people to feel loved and welcomed. We invite people to things. So they spend time together because they're friends. And AJ said it, newsflash, you can be friends with people in your church.
Yep.
And you've heard that one. We've both heard that one. 2, I had a guy, this is hilarious. So I had a guy come into my office, which I respect the guy, because actually he didn't. I ended up getting a hold of him because he is the father of someone in our congregation. And I don't want to get into it. This guy doesn't like me, and if I'm being honest, I don't like him. I can tell you why. I think he's aggressive and mean and whatever. But he comes in, and I at least respect him for this much. I asked the guy to come in. He sits down in my office. He kind of going nuts, and I say, calm down. And I said, what? He goes, I think you're a cult. And I was like, okay. I go, why? Give me a reason. He goes, because you have levels. You ready for this? This is why it's so stupid that people run around and say dangerous things. I'm sitting here. If you were in the meeting, I had some people in the other room because I didn't want it to get too heated. And I go, what are you talking about? Because you have levels in your church. People can reach different levels. I'm like, no, we don't. So anyway, I did some investigating. And we have a program in our church called Lionheart. And essentially what Lionheart is a more intense, not intense, it's not a good word. It's kind of like, if anyone's ever heard of Fight Club out there, it's sort of a program for men to really challenge themselves to grow in their relationships, grow in their relationship with God, with their significant other, spouse, being a better father, being a church, all of that. And it's essentially, we have challenges.
Yep.
And we kind of meet those challenges. And when you don't, because we want the standard to be how you get a strike, which we kind of, that concept is in Fight Club, I think.
Yeah.
Which Fight Club is generally accepted. So I think it's sort of our version of that to a degree. So you get a strike if you don't show up to your meetings, if you miss, because we want people to take it serious. And at your third strike, you're out of Lionheart. You don't graduate. You can come back and try it again the next time. Right? Nothing crazy about that. So he had heard his daughter was talking to her mother saying that her boyfriend who goes to the church had to leave because he couldn't get a strike for his Lionheart. Now, she should have explained this more, right? Yes. But, so then the mom goes to the husband and says, if he gets a strike, he's out of the church. Like, oh, man. I mean, that's how it starts, dude. So, but all he cared about was going, oh! So how many people he run around calling a cult? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a bunch of kids just being crazy. So that's I only give that as an example of something so stupid that someone hears. So, I could say that like, did you hear? If you don't go to, I don't know, the First Baptist Church, if you don't go to the food ministry, you can't be a part of the food ministry. Well, duh, man. If you don't show up to stuff, you're not going to be a part of it. It'd be like me saying, did you hear that if Bob doesn't go to work at Walmart, he gets fired? What a cult. Like, dude, chill out. Like, be realistic for a second. It is, man. It's ridiculous. Trying to think of other ones we've heard. Can you think of any other ones we've heard off the top? Trying to think of so I thought of one that just happened. The reason we're going to bring this up. So the alternative lifestyle, pagan witchcraft practicing relative of one of our churchgoers, our members. Which, by the way, that of itself, clearly, that's ridiculous that he's calling it. He said that he talked to someone, this is what I mean, who said that they got in, so this is going to sound, so I'm going to call her Jane, someone named Jane, which he doesn't even say the name, apparently used to go to our church and got in trouble for not coming to our Christmas Eve service. And he goes, wow, that's a cult. And then he also brought up us spending time together. Well, that one we already answered. Right. I don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes I feel like say you and I are friends, and we're going to church, and you're like, hey, dude, you coming to Christmas Eve service? And I'm like, yeah. And then I don't come. And then you, just being my friend who goes to church, like, dude, you didn't come to the Christmas Eve service. Then I walk up and go, the remnants cursed me out and said they hated me because I didn't go to Christmas Eve, when really it was just one guy, AJ, saying something. Like, people listen. Think of how crazy you're sounding. Just because someone says something that goes to a church doesn't mean they speak for the church.
Yes, and you got people confuse what love really is because they don't understand. Just because we're asking questions and like, hey, like, we're not trying to condemn you in any way by asking you, hey, why didn't you come? Like, especially if you're a person like this is your church home. Like, if you don't see someone over and over, you're going to say something to them. Exactly. And typically those are the people that cause the most ruckus because they don't want to be held accountable. And so instead of just owning to the fact that they're not showing up, right, or they're sinning, they just accuse the church of being bad. And that happens all the time. And it's just, I don't know, man, it's not right. It's not right, and it's dangerous. Yes. And again, you're actually helping real cult leaders because you're calling everybody a cult. So yeah, the other one I think is money. So if you ever come to this church, we don't talk about money. In fact, I can give you our spiel. Hey, if you're a guest here, you don't need to give us anything. If you're a member, you know what to do. It's between you and God. You're called to give. Newsflash, you're called to give. Accept it. If you're a Christian, call yourself a Christian, and think you are not called to give to your church, you're not reading the Bible, okay? No, I'm not going to talk about tithing. Tithing is actually an Old Testament term. I call it offering, and it should be from a generous heart. And in fact, if you really want my honest truth, I think
the idea of 10% probably in Jesus' meaning and his call would be too low. You're to give out of the generosity of your heart, and also so that this money doesn't have control over you.
Yep.
We don't talk about it, we don't push it. But when we have members, because that's a biblical principle, members give, if say a member's, I'm so excited, if their offering doesn't go through, say someone doesn't give for a year,
Okay.
they're going to get reached out to.
Yes.
Just to say, hey, what's going on? You okay? Are you going? And first and foremost, are you going through a tough time? Is something happening? Can we help you?
We do not. Yes, we do not come across with like, you're sinning because you're not giving us money.
You're going to hell.
Yeah, it's literally not what we do. We ask. We come from a place of love to make sure you are okay. It is not. We do not immediately just go to the fact that you're not giving and you should be. It's more like, are you okay?
There are big time denominations, meaning established denominations that even go farther than us, that send reports to you, that you get a report in the mail that says you haven't given, that you will lose your membership status in the church if you're not giving.
Yes.
And honestly, I don't think that's wrong, the membership status thing, because you are literally, that is to be your church. It's a sign of, right? It doesn't save you, but like it's, the Bible says it. It's no different than you holding me accountable to lying.
Yep.
Or pornography, right? Yeah, it's still, and a lot of times what happens is because we're Americans, the idea of money, like, don't you get money? In fact, I was raised this way. I'm very uncomfortable talking about other people's things, but again, just to make it clear, we never go and talk about anyone's money. We don't force, and if someone's told you that, they are lying, and you're welcome to get a hold of us, and I will clear it up. After this, I'm never going to talk about this again. But, you know, and the other thing that happens, anyway, those are typically the charges we get. The other one we get, I'm going to be completely honest with you, because our personalities, it does go to that, and that's just awkward for me. Like if someone were to say, Todd, you have a really cool personality, people want to be too. I in my heart don't believe that, okay? But because I have a certain look or a certain thing, people want to accuse me of that. You know, or because I speak a certain way, or because I challenge certain things, or because that kind of thing, they'll say, well, he's a cult. No, I'm not. If you know me at all, if you know this church, that is, you can maybe speak to this yourself. I probably to a fault don't take any honor.
No, no, and you, you know, you read through earlier talking about how people in cults, how they're treated. They can't even look at them. They can't even approach them. They can't speak to them. If anything, you've went to complete opposite direction where people are actually coming at you
in a disrespectful manner.
Yes,
even within our church.
And you handle it very well.
I try, yeah, and that's because I know who I am. You know, when we tell you that I think I am the worst of these, right? I mean that. So I take the position seriously that we are given. I know you do too. But I certainly don't think that I am due any, probably to a fault. Because I can tell you what, I can preach a heck of a sermon about, let's say you as a pastor, of what you are, you should be getting respect. And because of that, you know, but talking about that myself, I don't think of that.
I get it.
So, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, we kind of get talked about. The only other thing I would say that I've kind of heard rumblings someone said is like, okay, well, why do you not have, I don't know, Todd, do you criticize the church as a cat, except your church? First of all, no, I don't. If you go to this church, you know I'm challenging us all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But secondly, I'm never going to stop saying that the church, with a capital C, the bride of Jesus Christ, should be more and should step up. I'm not going to stop saying that. And that doesn't mean that I don't view us as part of that. Like we need to strive for what the Bible describes as the body of Christ.
That's
and
right.
You can't get mad that I'm doing that. You can. You shouldn't. Like I love the church, and I see beauty. I could tell you right now 100 things I see in just this community with different churches are doing that are beautiful.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean I'm not going to say, hey, you know, to some people, quit putting weights on people's back.
That's right. That means we're not going to just see this mess over here and sweep it under the rug because there's like there's a golden calf over here.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. We're still going to deal with this.
Exactly. Like,
yeah, that's
you
good.
know, the golden calf is pretty and like, yeah, that's cool. Like, well, maybe we're doing something right, but there's all this mess over here that we still need to take care of. Like,
yeah. So, you know, the last thing I would say we've heard about, just this is us specifically, and then we'll kind of wrap up about cult in general, the danger of it, is the name, the remnant. We've even considered changing it before.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to infamous question 11. Why do you choose a name that implies you're the only true Christians? Well, why do you choose why does the first church of God exist? They don't think they're the first church of God. We just saw a church called the Cool Church.
Yep.
They think they are the only cool church.
The coolest church of all
Yeah,
churches.
the Point, or no, Cross Bridge. They're the
Yeah.
only. They're the bridge to the cross. Like, this is insanity. Like, it's a name. You know, our verse comes, our kind of, I don't know, our slogan verse or our life verse is Romans 11:5-6. So too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. And if by grace, it cannot be on works. Otherwise, grace ceases to be grace. At the end of the day, you know, that even ties back to a deeper story from the Old Testament, in which, again, a prophet of God said, you need to destroy your Israel. You need to destroy your people because they've all turned to false gods. And God said, no, I have chosen for myself a remnant who have not bowed their knee to this false god. And we don't think we're the only one. We just want to be a part of that. We want to be a part of God's people. And that's the goal, right? To remember that grace, God's grace, it is by His grace we are saved. He is the instigator of our faith and our salvation. It's not our own works. That's it, man. And quit doing that. And use your brain, people. Use your brain for real. Like, what a silly thing to even make a point of. I would suggest that if you are out there making a big hoopla about a church's name, you need to check your heart.
Yes.
Because it's silly.
It is silly.
So, anyway, I think in general, should we be on the lookout for false teachers? Yes. But the authority is not whether you like someone or even necessarily like how they do something. The authority is the Bible.
Yep.
First and foremost, do they preach the gospel or do they preach something contrary to the gospel? If they preach something contrary to the gospel, then absolutely we are to stand up and challenge that. If they don't, then you need to shut up. And I'm sorry if that's blunt, but you do. Yep. You are hurting the kingdom. You are hurting the image of Christ to the world because they just see each other talk, like challenging each other. I mean, tearing each other apart. It's silly and it's dangerous. And this isn't just about us. We've heard other people being called that.
Yes.
Other churches. And it's funny, man, because then one church does it and then they say, well, no, we're not a cult. They are, because they kind of want to spread the blame. Guys, hopefully we've defined it for you. I know we talked really fast. We didn't want this to be an hour-and-a-half episode because it could be.
Oh,
and maybe we'll do a part 2 because I think we could go in detail looking at, okay, here's 4 or 5 people they've called a cult. Notice it makes no sense. So, for instance, someone calling John MacArthur, if you don't know who he is, and it doesn't matter, but a cult leader sounds absolutely ludicrous if you know anything about the Bible. He is not. I may not agree with how he says things sometimes, but that is a man of God. I don't deny that. We disagree on minor, secondary issues, but it's ludicrous to say that. But there are people that do that.
Yep.
And honestly, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You know, I have not. Stephen Furtick's another example. You know, sometimes success breeds contempt, brings jealousy, and when we're jealous of things, we want to attack it. What Stephen Furtick Elevation Church has accomplished in their, I don't know, man. Until I hear him preach something contrary to the gospel, it's hard for me to criticize him.
Right.
And I'm not going to. That doesn't mean he's not. I don't know. But I'm not going to open my mouth and say that when I don't know, because that's dangerous. And the Bible talks about that too in James, the danger of a tongue out of control that starts fires. Is it beneficial to the growth of the body? If it's not, then be quiet. Because otherwise you are gossip and a slanderer. And I'll tell you this right now. Scripture compares gossip and slanderers to murderers and thieves. It's wrong and it's dangerous.
Yep.
I don't know. Anyway, sorry to preach like that.
Dude, I love it.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I got nothing to add, man.
Do you guys have any questions on cults? The idea of it? Have you heard that before? Have you had, not necessarily with our church, but have you seen that or heard that around? You know, like, do you understand the difference? Do you understand the dangers of it? Let's be a part of I hope, a nationwide change within the body of Christ, the church, where we stop tearing each other down. We don't just talk the talk about peace and love and, unity, but we walk it out. So, yeah, let us know your guys' thoughts. Again, we were up in the air about this episode, but I think it's not really about us. I use us as a good example along with the others because we can specifically speak into some of those. But I've heard it about other people, and it makes me really frustrated when I hear that.
Absolutely. Don't just go off what you hear from others always. That's just walking. You're just walking. You're leading yourself to a blind life of just anybody can tell you anything. Like I think is what you're alluding to. But yeah, just don't open your mouth as soon as you hear something. Don't, like you said, the tongue can be very dangerous. Don't let other people's opinions mold your own.
This should mold it.
Exactly. Yeah. No more to say.
Well, and you said it before, that saying, loose lips sink ships. You said it right before we went in the air. That's so true.
Yes, it is true.
And I'll tell you this, so let's look at it one other way. The Bible actually says, do not bring an accusation against an elder unless there's more than one witness, right? You have two. Essentially, you better hope you're right.
Yep.
Because that's still God's chosen person if you're not.
Yep.
In the sense of he has put them in that position. And, that's a position that does deserve, we shouldn't be going around accusing other pastors because I wouldn't want to put myself in opposition to the Lord. And the Bible does talk about it. You guys can go read it yourselves in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. The idea of respecting, pastors and understanding what they do. That doesn't mean they're above criticism, but it does mean that we shouldn't be trying to tear them down just to tear them down.
Absolutely.
And again, we've heard that within our own congregation, have had to quiet it down before about other people. Let's be better. That's the old saying, man. Let's be better. So let us know your thoughts on cults. Let us know your thoughts on all that. Anything else we talked about. We'd love to hear your thoughts, blah, 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 blah. If you're on the podcast, we appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for putting up with my rambling today. AJ, thanks, man. I didn't mean to talk a lot.
No, dude, I love it, man. I love when you speak.
I love hearing AJ's talk, so I apologize that you're going to hear my voice a lot today. There's just a lot more information.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe next week we do a part 2. AJ will kind of lead the charge on that and explain it.
We'll see how that goes.
It could, man. We just got to prepare. That's what we got to do. So we love you guys. We hope you have a great day. The link above is active, www.theremnant.life/real-talk. Also, guys, if you're listening on podcast or via the video on Facebook or YouTube, would you consider donating to this ministry? Guys, I'm going to be honest, since we're real. We're in a position right now where we do need some support for Real Talk because we're going to have to, our church has a lot going on. We're going to have to make some cuts. And I'm telling you right now, you and I talked about this Sunday. This is literally something that can end up getting cut to a degree, or at least some cuts. We're going to be here.
Right.
If it's us and a cell phone, whatever.
Right.
But, if this has blessed you, would you consider, particularly if you're outside of this church, and this is something that's encouraged you or blessed you, would you consider giving? It's tax deductible. You can claim it. It's www.theremnant.life/give. And you can go to the drop-down box down to Real Talk, and it'll go directly into this.
That's right.
Again, we're awkward talking about money, but this is doing some cool stuff and reaching people. And again, we are going to, I keep saying it, we're going to do that sort of, report video at some point, letting people know all the cool things that we have got to see behind the scenes of how it's impacted people's lives.
It's incredible.
So, hey, tune in on this Thursday at 9 p.m. as we go live, and we're going to be answering questions that were in the database right now. If it didn't get answered today, it will get answered then.
Boom.
It's going live. We do live questions. We do crazy games. It's a fun time. Yeah?
I have a blast.
Me too, most of the time. So, I'm just kidding. Do you have anything else?
I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I also just want to point out real quick that you did the greatest Hank Hill earlier, and that's why I was laughing for a long time. When you did the it made me laugh. It made me laugh for a long time. I was hoping to fit that in. So
that's me, Hank Hill.
So, thank you guys. Hope you enjoy this episode, and I love you.
Hey, love you so much. Appreciate you. Please like, share, comment. Guys, listen, if you're watching this or if you're on the podcast even, the more you share this stuff, the more you put the word out, the more people it reaches. But if you're watching on Facebook particularly, or YouTube, but Facebook particularly, would you like, share, comment? All of that's called engagement, and it helps the Facebook analytics get this video out even more. That's just how it works. Other than that, we hope you guys have a great day. I should say that again. Hey, other than that, we hope you guys have a great day, and truly we mean this. God bless you.